You are listening to the Mohua Show, where it's all about celebrating the Junoon among changemakers and their journey. So let's talk a little bit about Christmas Karma is being called a landmark UK-India collaboration. So what is Christmas Karma all about, and why do you think this particular film represents really a turning point, in cross-border creative partnerships, and something I think the entire country is looking forward to, into taking our work internationally. So tell me a little bit more about this.
I think Gurinder Chadha, who's the writer director of Christmas Karma, has always been a global icon for both Britain and for India. So I think she really embodies the India UK cross border connection. It is a film that is about this amazing story and this arc of a Christmas miracle. What does it mean to overcome hate in today's world with love, kindness, and compassion? That is the messaging of the film. It's an adaptation of Charles Dickens' A Christmas Carol. In the Shadows, it's the story of Ramla Ali, a British Somalian female boxer, Muslim female boxer in the UK. So again, women, people of color. And then Daughter of Eden, our fourth film, is an Arabic English film by an Iranian female director and also a strong female protagonist in it.
What happens when storytelling stops being just entertainment and becomes a catalyst for social change? Today's guest has built an entire studio on that question. So meet Anushka Shah, founder and CEO of Civic Studios, a Mumbai-London production company incubated at the MIT Media Lab. From Christmas Karma to Santosh, her work bridges continents, cultures, and causes. Exactly the kind of guest that we love having. She proves once again to me, and I believe in this, that stories can shape empathy, imagination, and even policy. In this conversation, we dive into how Anushka is redefining purpose driven media, and building UK India creative ties, and leading a global team driven by mission as much as ambition. So, welcome, Anushka, in today's podcast. And I'm so proud to have you here because, the more I read about you, the more I'm convinced that we need more people like you. You were part of UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer's high level delegation to India. What did that moment signify for you personally and for the future of UK India storytelling collaborations? We're all very excited to know about that.
Thank you. And first of all, Mawa, thank you so much for having me on the show. I'm very excited to be here. I love the work that you do. And it gives me a lovely opportunity to not just talk about what we do at Civic Studios, but also to have a conversation with you. So thank you for that. Um, Thanks also for your question. The UK India Prime Minister's delegation meet, I think, was a very important moment of acknowledging the common interests both sides of the both parties have in increasing cross border collaborations in entertainment. We, of course, have an old history with the UK. And in more modern and present times, I think there's been a lot of interest from the UK to have more Indian productions shot over there, for India to have more, you know, um, sort of partnerships, especially keeping the UK India co production treaty in mind. For us, it particularly meant that as a company that already housed in both countries, we already do a lot of cross border work. So the ability to meet more people, both on the India and the UK side, to enrich that work has been fantastic. We've already seen a lot of outcome from that particular meet. So it was really an important moment to acknowledge sort of more modern relations between both countries.
Amazing. So let's talk a little bit about Christmas Karma is being called a landmark UK-India collaboration. So what is Christmas Karma all about, and why do you think this particular film represents really a turning point, in cross-border creative partnerships, and something I think the entire country is looking forward to, into taking our work internationally. So tell me a little bit more about this.
Think Gurinder Chadha, who's the writer director of Christmas Karma, has always been a global icon for both Britain and for India. So I think she really embodies the India UK cross border connection. In India, we keep talking about what is it going to take for Indian studios to go global. I think there's been a huge question around that. I think as a studio, we, with this film, have really taken a step towards that. this film, more than 50% of its funding has come from Indians around the world. Civic Studios is the major investor in it. We are the studio backing the film. Our main reason for coming on board for a film like this is that we really believe that the South Asian lens, not just South Asian lens from India, but South Asian lens also of the diaspora, what Indians represent around the world, is really important for us to take to the world, to other audiences. Of course, to other South Asian audiences, but to audiences from all backgrounds. And that's really what Christmas Karma represents. It is a film that is about this amazing story and this arc of a Christmas miracle. What does it mean to overcome hate in today's world with love, kindness, and compassion? That is the messaging of the film. It's an adaptation of Charles Dickens' A Christmas Carol. Scrooge, the main character, is played by Kunal Nair, who's a leading Indian global actor. It's directed by Gurinder, who's a leading Indian British Indian um, creator, and it is backed by Civic Studios. The trifecta of the creator, the talent, and the producer being from South Asian backgrounds is an amazing achievement, and I think a real landmark moment because it's about Indian storytelling going completely global.
Amazing, amazing. So, what do the UK and India misunderstand? Let's ask you, about each other's creative industries, and where do you think that they naturally complement also one another?
I think the misunderstandings are minimal. I think it's a matter more of working out logistical aspects of what are the best ways to take advantage of the strengths of each ecosystem. India has such a rich database of stories, things that we need to say, want to say to the world. The UK has a robust infrastructure, particularly on the tax credit side of it. So there's a lot of complementarities between how the two ecosystems can work together, and I think that's really what that meet and the collaborations are about. Um, I think because of the shared history, because of the huge Indian diaspora in the UK, because of India's colonial context, there's a very important opportunity. I think that these sort of collaborations also have to talk about the role of imperialism in the UK. That's something that is increasingly discussed less and less, spoken about less in schools. And if you see with a movie like Christmas Karma, it does touch upon, very importantly, themes of immigration, race, and colonialism. I think that, uh, it's, I wouldn't say it's a very important conversation to have. And I think it's important that both the UK and India sides are in that. So I would also call that, in some sense, a complementarity of themes and an opportunity to talk about the modern context of colonialism.
So, you're launching a £1 million climate media fund. I mean, this is very, very impressive. So, what kind of climate stories do you wish that the world would finally start telling? To me, is always, to a very large extent, I feel that women's stories have not yet had the kind of focus that it should have around climate, change. And that's something that I'm looking to work towards. So, I want to hear a little bit about your own personal, take on this.
Absolutely. The Climate Change Fund for us is part of a larger ecosystem of media content we're creating that talks about climate action. Climate change is a problem and climate action is an opportunity. How do we tell stories of climate action that are inspiring, hopeful, constructive? Very often, when we come across climate change, it has a very doomsday narrative. You feel uh, quite debilitated into taking action because you feel like, what difference can my actions make? I think we're looking to tell stories of real people who have taken that action, whose change has created positive impact, and many of them are women. Um, I think it's very interesting that you bring up the female lens in this. I became a mother 10 months ago. I had my first baby. And it really was a moment to reckon with, well, what is the future of the world? And what are we doing to make sure our children and their children grow up in a safe world? They don't grow up with a sense of anxiety, of existential crisis. So at Civic Studios, really our new vertical around climate media is to create stories of hope, stories of empowerment. The Climate Media Fund specifically is a £1 million fund with a set of different funders, both from India and the UK, who have come together to say, let's have a conversation between the global north and the global south so that we can tell powerful stories of climate action and resilience.
Amazing. So, do you really believe that creators have a moral responsibility, to address climate change, or is it really an unfair expectation from artists?
I know that this is a common question. I know it comes up with media impact. I think you have a moral responsibility to do good and be good no matter who you are, no matter what you're doing. I don't think it's bigger for artists. I don't think anyone can say that I completely give up all responsibility on doing good, on trying to make the world a better place. In some sense, shouldn't we all be striving towards that? I think for artists, you have a powerful platform and a powerful voice. And the question is, how do you want to use that? When you create something that's of pure entertainment, fun, and comedy, that's also doing a huge service to the world. So I don't think social impact comes in a specific brand or definition. It comes with the idea that you're adding positive value to the world, making somebody laugh, taking the tension off their daily trials and tribulations. That is a value you're adding to the world. Somebody else might want to tell a story that's much more intense in its social impact brand. It might be a story that's hard hitting, that's grim, that's about ugliness in the world that sometimes we don't want to see, but it affects somebody in vulnerable communities. Um, I think there are artists who try and do a blend of that. How do you tell a very important story, but where it's still entertaining, and creative first? So I think there's all sorts of brands, but yes, I think everybody has a moral responsibility to do good.
Absolutely. So, let's just talk a little bit about running a company across Mumbai and London, and what has this whole global setup taught you about leadership that a single location business never ever could. I love the idea of doing work between London and India. So I would
Yeah.
really like your take on it.
Yeah, it's been wonderful, I think, to
Mm.
have teams, offices, networks, partners in both countries. It
Yes.
has, we started out in the US at the MIT Media Lab. So that was sort of the first base. Then we I set up the production house in Mumbai. So that became second base. And then we opened the UK office about a year and a half ago. That was third base. The combination of having partners, US, India, UK, has meant that our own horizons are constantly challenged and expanding, that we are seeing perspectives from different parts of the world. And today, no matter what ecosystem you're based in, where you're creating content, consumption is global. There are no borders when it comes to entertainment in terms of audience preferences, insights. You'll be creating something for a local audience, maybe in Marathi, but it's gone global, and somebody in Spain or in the US is watching it. So the ability to have teams and a presence in different places really gives us different perspectives. It allows us to access new audiences, new markets, new stories. I think if we didn't have this, we wouldn't have been able to take a movie like Santosh and distributed it in the UK. Unfortunately, it's not had a release in India, but thankfully, we were able to still take it to some audiences in the UK. And in fact, because of some of the work we've done around Santosh in the UK, the press around that reached India, and I think that's how more people back home got to know about the film. So we feel like the cross-border aspects work in very interesting ways.
So, as someone, building a mission led company, how do you convince investors that impact can also be, commercially viable? And that's something I struggle with. So, I would really like your take on this.
Yeah, it's a great question because sometimes people assume that when you say your objective is to do social impact,
Yeah.
that the content comes in certain forms that may
Yeah.
not be commercially
Yeah.
viable.
Exactly.
Our motto sort of at Civic Studios has always been entertainment first. For us, it doesn't work if it feels like the story has a great message, yes, but we ourselves don't feel like we're going to sit and watch it and enjoy it, especially after a long day in the office. Then we feel like that's not entertaining and that's not going to have reach. And similarly, also the reverse. It was a story that's very entertaining, but it doesn't have a message that we feel like is important for the world to hear. Then we often say, okay, it's a great product, it's a great script, but this is not for us. There might be another producer who can actually do a much better job with it than we. Um, so I think the sort of mandate of always saying that it has to have a strong combination of entertainment, impact, and be commercially sustainable is what has helped us convince partners and collaborators that it works. And I think over time in our various projects, we've been sort of able to show that. From the very first short film we did, we were able to get it on to Amazon Mini. We were able to sort of bring in revenues from that. The first series we did was called Family Archkal. That's on Sony Live. Similar trajectory for that. And for all of these, we started out with very specific messaging and goals, and we did a lot of research into, okay, how is it that the audiences who most need to be impacted about this, how are they thinking about the issue? What is it that is the right fact, the right research, the right information? Then we worked with our writers, our directors, our creators to sort of blend that in. Um, so we're always making sure that we've got all the three boxes ticked.
So you've spoken about autonomy and trust, so how do you really cultivate a culture where, your team starts feeling very empowered also within themselves, to take risks?
It's a very simple goal that I was taught by my boss at MIT. He said when we hire people, we hire them with three goals in mind. A, they've got to be smart and good at what they do. B, they've got to be very bold and risk taking because
Hmm.
that's when I think the best changes in the world happen. And three, they've got to be a really nice person.
Yes,
I think the third is often very undervalued when you're
that's
hiring,
most important.
but it's the most important. And I think it's
Absolutely.
important because it builds exactly the two words that you said, trust and
Hmm.
autonomy. When you believe that someone's intentions are good, even if their skill isn't quite exactly what you were looking for,
I agree.
the latter can be built, the first can't.
I
Um,
agree.
and I have always been very lucky, for the most part in the Civic Studios team. I would say everyone who is doing the role they are meant to is much smarter at it than I am, 100%. And that gives me a lot of trust in saying, well, what do you think? We should go with that. And sure, I'll try and give the bigger context of what is it as a company we're all collectively trying to do. But in that specific bit, each member of our team knows best. I think everyone on our team feels a big sense of ownership, a sense of collaboration. We have an open environment. We make sure we're listening to each other. And because it's an interdisciplinary company, we have folks who are from a pure entertainment background, folks who are from a pure research background. So none of us, me included, have the perfect answer that blends all of it. So listening to each other, I think, has been a very important part of our work.
So, very cliched, but then I'd really like to ask you, as a female entrepreneur, I mean, I hate to put a gender before, any role, but then, we know that leading across continents, there are challenges that we face. I know that for sure. So, have
Yeah.
you faced any, and how did you really turn them into opportunities for yourself? It would be great for our listeners.
Yeah, absolutely. And I agree. I think we never like to call the gender aspect out, but that's
Yeah.
the reality of the world. And so even if we don't like to acknowledge it, it's an
Mhm.
important thing to call out, that it's not the same to do what you're doing if you're one gender versus the other. I have to say, for the large part, I feel like I've been very lucky to have a very supportive environment. Um, but often the gender aspect comes in very subtle ways. People assume a certain set of skills and strengths that you might traditionally associate more with women than with men. And sometimes you have to catch yourself also giving into that stereotype, you know. Um, I think you feel like the world expects you to be a certain way, and so you are a certain way. You're often afraid to take another stand because you know that a woman would get more backlash for saying things a certain way than a man would. I think for me, the biggest learning in the last few years has been to not be afraid of my own brand of feminism, which doesn't have to come from any expectation of what somebody else expects that to be, but what is my own belief. To lead with empathy, with sensitivity. Sometimes it's seen as weak, sometimes it's seen as, are you being too soft um, in a certain conversation, in a certain partnership. But I have never believed that aggression is the solution. You have to be very efficient and smart and not let anyone take advantage of you. But I think empathy and sensitivity goes a long way. It builds trust, especially in an entertainment and culture business. There is no one right or wrong. Nobody at the end of the day can really say, oh, that decision was right because a movie made so much money or it didn't. There's a
Yeah,
thousand reasons why a movie makes money and why it didn't.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Um, but what stays is, was that a good partnership? Did you
Mhm.
trust that partner and would you work with them again? Will
Mhm.
you build something of value together? So I think I've learned to be more confident of that lens now.
Fantastic. Yeah. I don't think I'd be able to work with somebody if I cannot trust them. I
Right.
think that is the foundation for any equation whatsoever. And the older you grow, you start realizing that there's tremendous value, in just this one very thing that the other person has got your back and you've got theirs.
Right.
The media world, like, I hate to say that, but they still associate women with soft skills, right? So, what myth do you think that women leaders should now really bust, and should say, oh, come on, this is like really yesterday? What, according to you, Anushka, you think they should go?
Um, I think that sometimes when it comes to the business and economics of the industry, it's still much more of a male dominated side of the industry. Particularly often when I see in panels and conversations, there are still so many times where it's a manel. You'll see either all men or they'll be like,
Word.
yeah,
Panel.
I've learned this word is a thing. um, or they'll have, like 20 people who are a group or a committee or advisory or a board, and they'll have one woman in there just to tick a
Mm,
box. I think that's a really missed opportunity. And I think there are
mm,
so many women in the industry doing amazing work. And you really do need to platform that. So I would say, especially in the business and economic side, I think we're quite underrepresented and undervalued there. And God knows this industry doesn't have its economics figured out. So it's not like what we've been doing
that's
is,
so true.
is the right thing. Uh,
So true. You said entertainment can spark civic imagination, right? So what does that term truly, mean to you, and how do you measure whether a story actually inspires agency in audiences? Because it's so blurred at a certain point.
yeah. I think to answer the first part, when we say civic imagination, what our goal at Civic Studios is to inspire more civic action. For that, there's three things you sort of need an audience to feel. One is for them to start to be aware about a particular issue. So let's say you're talking about climate change. You first want your audience to be aware, what is climate change and what is that specific issue within climate you might be talking about. The second is to feel a sense of emotional engagement and connect to it. If I feel just that, okay, I hear rationally about a rise in greenhouse gases, I don't feel motivated to act around it. It's scientific, it's far, it's not touchy feely, it's not in my world. But if I feel an emotional connect and I realize, okay, that particular aspect is making the air I breathe worse for myself, for my child, for my family, now suddenly I feel emotionally invested. And the third is action. So, okay, now I know about it, I feel about it, what do I do? So, modeling all these three things in entertainment in a story is what we call civic imagination. It starts to give you an imagination of what to do and why to do. How do you measure whether a piece of media actually does that? It's a really difficult thing. Like you said, it's very blurry. And in fact, the best media works in a very subconscious way, you know. But there are a few different techniques. There are surveys, interviews, focus group discussions. There is something called RCTs, randomized controlled trials, that researchers use to measure the sort of difference between a group who has been exposed to the media versus not. is a certain metric of their thought or behavior or action, does it have a big enough delta versus a group who has not seen that? So there are research methods around it. They're not easy. And so one of the things that we do is ensure that in our content design, we're thinking very actively about the change. We use a research framework. We have particular metrics. We evaluate a story against that. And sort of the best of our ability, we try to make sure that, okay, this story is going to do X, Y, Z.
So, we've also spoken about there's such a large slate that you actually have. When you began, when you spoke to me, I mean, your slate actually spans legal dramas, climate content, short films, animation. That's a lot. So, how do you decide actually, which social issues are ready for mainstream storytelling? Which one, and how do you do it?
I think that's really the most important question in this,
Yeah.
because you could be picking up issues left, right, and center, but are they really the issues people need to hear about when they're giving you that attention? And getting somebody's attention is so difficult. So now, when they're paying attention to something you've created, is that issue even worth talking about? Does it affect enough people? Does it even have the scope to be impacted? I mean, there are some social issues, even if you feel a lot about it, it's not necessarily where your effort, energy, money, time, whatever it is that you're going to give to it has the biggest delta. So I think we try and think very carefully about what is the media format we're creating. So, for example, if it's a feature film, we're thinking about, well, where is it going to be distributed? Is this going to be out in cinemas? And is it a big commercial film that's going to reach a wide audience? And what is that wide audience? In India, is it going to be urban and metro cities? Is it going to be second tier? Is it rural? Is it a combination? How does this issue affect those audiences? If you're talking about something like air quality, it doesn't affect everybody equally. There's a climate vulnerable community. If you're in cities, you can protect yourself in some sense a little bit better. You can stay indoors. You can put your,
Air
air,
purifiers.
all of that. So we think very carefully about the format, the distribution, the audience, and then the engagement with that issue. And we try to make sure that we are taking all that into consideration when we're thinking about what is the story and what is the impact that it's going to have to that audience. And so we try to pick up issues based on that. We work with a lot of people in the development and social sector, researchers, activists, organizations that are thinking very hard about these questions, that are prioritizing what are the issues to work on. And so we try to integrate as much of that research as we can.
So, Anushka, there's Christmas Karma, there is Santosh in the shadows. Your slate really spans immigration, caste, gender, sports, identity, and so much more. So, what makes a story, really the best material for Civic Studios?
I think for us, particularly with the projects that you pointed out, in the UK, our focus is very much supporting and creating stories by people of color and women. That's the common thread across the four projects in this last just year and a half we've taken up in the UK. Christmas Karma is written, directed, created by a woman of color. The lead actor is a brown actor. All of that is very difficult in a mainstream UK movie that is designed for big commercial success and for a wide audience. Santosh, Sandhya, the director, it's a female, she's a female director. The film has a strong female lead, again, Indian, but for a global consumption. In the Shadows, it's the story of Ramla Ali, a British Somalian female boxer, Muslim female boxer in the UK. So again, women, people of color. Um, and then Daughter of Eden, our fourth film, is an Arabic English film by an Iranian female director and all strong female protagonist in it. So all of these really, for us in the UK, that's what makes a story. Similarly, in India, really our goal is to tell stories that are unheard, that are from communities that may not usually have a voice. We try and do a lot of conversations around diverse ethnic groups in India. So that's a big part of for us. Of course, the first thing is it's got to be a great story. That's a given. But what's the second thing that makes it particularly tick for Civic Studios? I think this aspect is big.
So, there's across formats, there's feature films, shorts, animation, and, shows. So, your work merges research with storytelling. So, how do you really translate insights, from issue experts, community organizations, change makers, into characters, conflicts, and then the plot without making the entire narrative feel very didactic?
Yeah. Yeah, great question. I'll take the example of our first short film that we did because I think it's a good microcosm of our process. It was called Vakil Babu. It has Abhishek Banerjee in the lead, and it's directed by Sumit Purohit, who's also a writer creator on Scam. We wanted to talk about domestic violence, but not so much have the film say, what should a woman do? Because we're always talking about that. But often when women even take action, even when they decide, okay, I want to get out of the situation, who do they go to? Very often women are rejected from obviously the husband side of the family, but then also their own side of the family.
Absolutely. And that's not spoken much about.
Really not spoken about, right? We're always saying, okay, women should get out of that situation. And why is she still continuing in that? I think the very real question is, well, where does she go? You're rejected from all sides. And there is a very high proportion of women who face domestic violence that is correlated to an attempt to suicide. When you go to the police, when you go to the courts, these are very intimidating, male dominated patriarchal spaces.
Absolutely.
There's a very high level of when you go to the police, you are rejected by the police over there from filing a complaint because most often you're told that, okay, go home and try and sort it out, with the husband. The police also have their own constraints and their own reality. Their Indian police are very overworked, very overburdened. Their incentive system about solving or closing a case that leads directly to their sort of performance measures are also very skewed. So less a blame game on any one particular stakeholder and more that the entire ecosystem is complicated, not there to support a women. So our short film was going to be about, well, what can the legal system do better to improve this ecosystem? And so we had to do a lot of research on that. We're not lawyers, we didn't have the answers to it. We did interviews with lawyers, with judges, with police officials, with women, most importantly, who had walked that journey, what they would have thought helped, didn't help, what worked for them. A simple insight like when you go to file a case, if you go as a single woman versus as a group, there's a higher chance that when you go as a group, the police officer will take it seriously. Small things like that. So we identified those insights. We built it into a whole sort of research packet, um, and we kept a lot of the clips and audio bites of the women, of course, with their consent, talking about the issue. And that whole research packet was then given to our writers and directors, and we worked with them very actively on building that messaging into the story. They know, of course, their first role there is to tell a story that's engaging, that is going to be interesting for anyone, whether or not they care about this issue to watch. But through the lens of that story, then through strong characters that they built, this messaging got built in. So Abhishek Banerjee, who plays the lead lawyer, he's done a beautiful job of in a short film, that brief 20 minutes, showing how a lawyer who is quite cynical, who's doing this day in and day out, who's you become detached after
Yeah,
a
yeah.
while. But you
Totally.
show the arc of how he then realizes what it means for that woman to have come to his table, how much she has gone through, and the strength she's had to have to come to that table. And now what his responsibility to do right by her is. And so we built in some of those quote unquote good actions that a lawyer should take to support his client. Um, yeah.
Wonderful, wonderful. So, Anushka, what's that one mistake you think you would have made? When you look back, you've made as a first-time entrepreneur that really turned out to be your best teacher.
Oh, yeah, I know exactly the answer to that.
Tell me.
I started Civic Studios with zero experience in entertainment or production. I started it on the gumption that everybody is a storyteller in a way, and we will figure out as we go along together as a group, as a team. I think that was both a vice and a virtue. The vice there was that this is a really difficult industry, much harder than I think most of us can tell from the outside because we see the excitement, the beauty, the glam. And we hear about the downsides, but you hear about that as, I don't know, things like drug consumption. And what does it mean when you go from an actor at like top talent to you don't have a good film coming out. So you hear about the again that side of the problems of the industry. You don't hear about how difficult it is to put a film or a series together, no matter who you are. You don't hear so much about the struggles of how much you have to really believe in a product, in a film, in a show, even though there's only a small share of anything you work on that will actually get released. But you have to have that equal belief for all the projects. So there's a lot of challenges to it. I think if I had maybe a little bit more experience in the industry before starting the company, the first few years would have been a little bit smoother, a little bit less trial and error, also because we started just before the pandemic. Having said that, the virtue to going into it as a newbie was we were not inheriting some of the bad practices of the industry. We came in with a very clear, logical mind of, well, isn't this how it should be? For example, contracts. We're very clear. Everybody we work with needs to have a contract. You don't take any writer, any newcomer into the industry also. You don't take advantage of saying, okay, well, we'll pay you later. We don't do that. We're very clear with contracts. We always pay on time. We understand the struggle of the industry. We try and make our contract as fair from both sides. Um, we're very, I would say, we're a little bit almost we have a corporate element of how organized and efficiently we try to work, because it's very easy in this industry to feel like, okay, it's a creative product, and so you need to give it lots of time and energy and effort,
Yeah,
and
yeah,
take 10 years. But there's a cost to those 10 years, and people need to get paid in that time. So I think some of those things were a virtue also to come in with a fresh lens.
I think that's fantastic, and it's really the need of the hour, in the creative world.
Yeah.
So because this is so unorganized, or else
Yeah.
it can be really crazy. So finally, Anushka, what do you think will define the next decade of meaningful storytelling? Will it be technology, empathy, or courage?
I think all those three kind of go in hand in a way. I think technology is probably the horse leading the cart. The pace of AI change, of course, is so rapid, and everyone's trying to skill up and figure out how do you not get left behind by the changes to AI. We have been using a lot of it to experiment with our own work. My background at MIT, I used to work actually a lot on large language models and artificial intelligence there. So I was able to sort of pull some of the experience and work from that time, back into the company. The empathy is very important as you're doing that, because AIs inherently reflect the biases of human society. So we have to realize that in technology driving our pace ahead, we can't be even faster leaving behind the people and communities not represented, in our media. Um, Something like facial recognition technology. I had a colleague at MIT who worked a lot on it, and most of those algorithms were trained on white faces, so it would recognize people of color as easily. Now you take that and you sort of propel it onto a larger scale across different AI work. It can have a very very negative effect. If you see when you start to use AI softwares that generate images and you try and generate a woman's image versus a man's, it's a much more hypersexualized version than great man's. So all of those biases reflect. So making sure you keep the empathy central is important. And I think courage, very important, because it's very easy to feel left behind by the pace of technological change. The older you are, the more you might feel like this is not for me, it's overwhelming. But I think to have the courage to say that this is where the world is going and I kind of need to understand it and then decide how much I want to use it, not use it. I think that takes courage. So I think all three are important.
Thanks, Anushka, for this wonderful conversation. And for our listeners, if this conversation made you rethink the power of storytelling, don't let it stop here. Share this episode with someone who believes stories can change the world. because as we can see and we can hear, they can. And if you've enjoyed this discussion, listen to more inspiring conversations on the Mohua Show, hit follow, leave us a review, and tell us what part of Anushka's journey inspired you the most. Until next time, keep questioning, keep imagining, and keep creating impact through the stories you choose to tell. Thank you so much, Anushka Shah, for being on today's episode. It's really been an honor to have you here with us.
Thank you, Mama. It was really lovely to meet you, and I thoroughly enjoyed the conversation.